The world is not controlled by countries, not the United States, not China, not Russia, not even rising powers like India. February 24th, 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. The world watches tanks cross borders, missiles strike cities. But here's what most people missed. The real war started 2 weeks earlier in the bank vaults in London, trading floors in New York, data centers in Brussels. Even before a single shot was actually fired, Russia lost $300 billion, not to any bomb, but to a system. Because here's what nobody tells you: countries don't control the world, systems do. And there are exactly 7 of them. Once you see these systems, wars stop looking random, economic crisis becomes predictable, and you will understand something most people never realize. The game was never about borders, it's about who controls the infrastructure underneath. See, when you watch the news, you see presidents shaking hands, prime ministers signing treaties, flags waving at the United Nations, and you naturally think, wow, this is where power lives. But then, explain this. The British Empire collapsed in 1947, but the city of London is still one of the 3 most powerful financial centers on earth. The Soviet Union disappeared in 1991, but Russia's Gazprom controlled European heating for the next 30 years. American presidents change every 4 years, but Silicon Valley's algorithm have shaped global information flow for 2 decades straight. Countries are temporary, governments are replaceable, but the systems underneath, they persist along centuries. The first system is money, but not just wealth. This is about controlling the infrastructure of capital. Who decides which countries get loans? Who determines which industries receive incentive? Who stabilizes markets during a financial crisis? See, today over 60% of international trade is still settled in US dollar. This means even when India started buying oil from Russia, the trade flew through the dollar denominated systems. This gives the United States of America structured leverage. This has nothing to do with their military, by the way, it's just financial architecture. Here's what I mean. February 2022, the United States of America and the European Union froze $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves. Overnight, no vote, no trial, no negotiation, just a keystroke. Russia's money sitting in banks in London, Paris, Frankfurt became inaccessible. You don't need to win wars anymore, you just need to control the currency of global trade. Because when you define the financial infrastructure, you define the rules everyone else plays by, even your enemies. This is System 1. The second system is organized violence, and before you think this is actually outdated, let me show you something. Right now, China is claiming islands in the South China Sea. The Philippines says international law gives us those waters. Vietnam says historical records have proven our claim on those waters, and China says nothing. They're just building military bases on artificial islands, runways, radar systems, anti-ship missiles. By the time the legal arguments are actually settled in court, China has a physical control on the waters. Here's the uncomfortable truth. International law only matters if somebody can actually enforce it. In 1991, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in exchange for Russia, the United States, and United Kingdom to guarantee its territorial integrity. The Budapest Memorandum, a signed agreement. 2014, Russia annexes Crimea. 2022, Russia invades. Where was the guarantee? Ukraine learned one of the hardest lessons in geopolitics. Promises are only as strong as your ability to defend them. This is why India spends $81 billion annually on defense. Not because we want to invade any country, because without credible deterrence, sovereignty is just a suggestion. Military power creates the boundary conditions within which everyone else actually operates. This is System 2. The third system is information control, and this might be one of the most underestimated systems in the modern world. Because wars are no longer won on battlefields, they are actually won before the first shot is actually fired. October 2023, Israel-Gaza conflict erupts. Within 48 hours, both sides are fighting on 2 fronts, military and narrative. Who's the aggressor? Who's the victim? Who deserves international support? These questions get answered not by facts but by who controls the stories. And the story shapes diplomatic pressure, military aid, economic sanctions, public opinion in key countries. The information war determines the physical war's outcome. Now, here's where it gets dangerous. TikTok reaches 1 billion people daily. Meta platforms 3 billion people. YouTube 2.5 billion. These platforms decide what information people see, what trends, what gets suppressed, what goes viral. In January 2021, Twitter banned a sitting US president. Think about that for a second. A private company made a decision that affected global politics. So, who had more power in the moment? The elected leader of the world's most powerful country and democracy, or the person who controlled the platform? And here's why this matters for India. We have 1.4 billion people online. If Indian platforms controlled information flow the way American platforms actually do, we wouldn't have just been an economic power, we'd have narrative power, the ability to shape how the world perceives reality. This is system 3. Control information and you control perception. Control perception and you control everything else. The fourth system is technological dominance, and technology doesn't change the game, it rewrites the rules entirely. Throughout history, major technological shifts have transformed global power. The printing press destroyed the Catholic Church's information monopoly. The steam engine shifted from agricultural societies to industrial ones. Today, the frontier is artificial intelligence. The United States and China are in a quiet war on AI, not with missiles, with research labs, computer power, talent acquisition, data infrastructure. Why? Because whoever leads artificial intelligence will control military decisions, economic productivity, information filtering at global scale, and the architecture of the next century. But here's the choke point. Taiwan produces over 60% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. One company, TSMC. Your phone, TSMC chip. Your car, TSMC chip. Your phone grid, TSMC chip. Your weapon systems need a TSMC chip to operate. This tiny island has become geopolitically untouchable. Why? Because if Taiwan's chip production is actually stopped, global civilizations would experience a technological heart attack. In 2022, the US passed the CHIPS Act, $52 billion to rebuild domestic semiconductor manufacturing. Why spend that much? Because they realized something. You cannot be a superpower if your technology depends on somebody else's supply chain. And here's where India comes in. We have engineering talent, digital infrastructure, a glowing tech ecosystem. If India becomes a semiconductor manufacturing hub in the next decade, we just don't grow economically. We gain strategic leverage that actually rivals military power. This is System 4. Technology creates asymmetries that can eclipse everything else. The fifth system is energy, and here's the brutal truth. Civilizations don't run on ideas, they run on energy. Winter 2022, Europe faces an energy crisis. Germany, the industrial engine of Europe, has 60 days of natural gas reserves left. Factories preparing to shut down, hospitalize, rationalizing, heating, inflation spiking across the continent. Why? Because one man in Moscow controlled the valve to the Nord Stream pipeline. Russia didn't invade Germany, they didn't need to, they just turned off the gas and Europe actually started scrambling. This is weaponized dependency. Without energy, your factories stop, your transportation collapses, your hospitals shut down, your enemy fundamentally freezes. Russia didn't need tanks, they had leverage. Saudi Arabia doesn't have the world's largest military, but for 50 years, they've controlled global oil prices. When they actually go on to adjust the production of their oil, stock markets move, inflation rates shift, governments panic. Right now, India imports 85% of its crude oil. Our economic growth is partially dependent on Middle East stability, global shipping routes, dollar denomination, and the entirety of the energy markets. This is why India is pushing renewable energy so aggressively. Solar, wind, nuclear, green hydrogen. Not for just climate change agenda or any ideology, but for strategic autonomy. Because energy independence equals geopolitical freedom. This is System 5, ladies and gentlemen. Control energy and you control the metabolic rate of the civilization. The sixth system is actually supply chain control, and this is where invisible dependencies become geopolitical weapons. March 2020, COVID-19 shuts down global manufacturing. Suddenly, the world discovers something terrifying. 80% of active pharmaceutical ingredients used in the Western drugs were actually made in China and India. When supply chains broke, the United States, the richest country on earth, couldn't produce basic medicines, not because of money, but because they outsourced their manufacturing capacity completely. China sources 70% of rare earth metals, right? They're the ones who are processing these metals. These materials are essential for electric vehicles, wind turbines, military electronics, and smartphones. This gives China veto power over the green energy transition. They don't need to fight, they just need to restrict supply. Right now, Western companies are de-risking from China. Apple, Google, Tesla, all of them are actually moving their manufacturing to where? Countries like India, Vietnam, Mexico. And here's India's 10-year window. If we execute well, if we build infrastructure, if we become irreplaceable in critical supply chains, we gain the same leverage as Taiwan has gained over the past couple of years with semiconductors. We become too important to ignore. Taiwan's semiconductor dominance isn't accidental, it is actually strategic. By making themselves indispensable by both US and China, they created a situation where both superpowers have an interest in their survival. That's not luck, that's weaponized dependency in reverse. This is System 6. Supply chains create leverage and leverage create powers without armies. The seventh system is culture, and this is the most invincible form of power because culture doesn't conquer, it seduces. Why do teenagers wear Nike? Why do Korean skincare routines trend in tier 1 cities in India? Why does everyone know who Spider-Man actually is? Because culture creates desire and desire shapes behavior. The US military has bases in almost 80 countries, but American culture has influence in every country on earth. Music, fashion, technology, lifestyle, you name it, they're there. That is called soft power. China actually tried to build soft power to Confucius Institute, spends tens of billions of dollars on it, opened centers in universities worldwide, but failed dramatically. Why, you may ask? Because culture cannot be imposed on someone. It has to be so attractive that people automatically walk into it. Now compare that to BTS. The Korean government didn't actually spend a rupee on BTS, yet BTS reached 1 billion people. Why? Because culture succeeds when it feels authentic, not manufactured. And here's where India has a once in a century opportunity. For the first time in 200 years, Indian culture is actually going global. Yoga, Ayurveda, Bollywood, cricket, spirituality, food. These aren't just exports, they are influence vectors. When somebody practices yoga, they unconsciously connect with the Indian philosophy. When they watch an Indian film, they see world through an Indian lens. This builds affinity, and affinity translates to diplomatic capital, economic partnerships, and strategic alliances. Culture doesn't give you immediate power, but it gives you something better, durable influence. Because once someone has actually adopted your culture, they start seeing the world through your framework. This is System 7, the slowest system, but potentially the most permanent one. Now, here's where it gets dangerous. These 7 systems don't operate independently, they multiply each other. Take the Russia-Ukraine war. It's just not a military conflict, it's simultaneously financial warfare, sanctions, frozen assets, SWIFT bans, electronic blackmails, gas cutoff, oil emergencies, information battle, propaganda, social media narrative, technological race, drone warfare, cyber attacks, satellite intelligence, supply chain disruption, exports affecting global food security, and cultural positioning, global sympathy, global isolation. Every major geopolitical event that we see today is a multi-system that we actually need to sit and decode. And countries that understand this don't play one game, they play all 7 simultaneously. Control 2 systems, you're a regional power. Control 4, you're a superpower. Control 6, you are absolutely untouchable. Right now, the United States control 4 to 5 systems: finance, military, information, technology, culture. China controls 2 to 3, manufacturing, supply chains, growing in technology, and energy positioning. Russia controls 1 to 2, energy, military in limited scope, you can say. India controls 0.5 systems, cultural influencers actually rising, and supply chain potentially building in the next decade or so. Here's what we need to do. By 2030, according to the manifesto by the government of India, India will control two of these systems, right? China will lose control on 1, US will desperately try to maintain 3. The question is, which systems shift? So when you watch the news tomorrow and see India and US signed defense agreement, or China invests $50 billion into African infrastructure, or Saudi Arabia now joins BRICS, don't just read the headlines, right? Try to see what system is actually moving and what this move can mean to the entirety of the system. Every treaty is a play for control. Every investment is actually strategic positioning. Every alliance is leverage building. Once you understand the systems, global events become confusing. They become predictable, not perfectly but actually strategically, because systems have patterns and patterns reveal what comes next. Countries are important, but they are not the source code. They are the user interface. The real power lies in seven systems underneath: financial infrastructure, military capability, information network, technological dominance, energy security, supply chain control, and cultural influence. Master these systems and you understand how the world actually works. Not how it appears, but how it really operates.